The moment she laughed, the bartender glanced at her like she was being too loud. She didn't notice. She was tossing back her second cocktail and doing that thing where she tilted her head and touched her hair like she was starring in some low-budget romance. And across from her, some guy in a slim-fit blazer was eating it up. His hand was already inching closer to hers on the table. Maybe he thought he was winning something. From the alley across the street, I watched her through the wide window like she was part of a show I paid too much to see. I wasn't supposed to be there. She didn't know I was in the city. She thought I was home, sorting tools in the garage, like a good little background character in her glamorous rerun. She always liked bars with exposed brick and ambient lighting, said it made her feel like she was part of something bigger. Meanwhile, I was this something stable she could always return to when the lights dimmed and the crowd thinned. You know what the worst part is? She looked happy. Not fake happy. Not dinner party smile happy. Real. Effortless. Like the laughter belonged to a version of her I hadn't seen in years. And the man sitting across from her? He didn't have my tired eyes. He didn't carry the weight of 3 missed vacations, 2 dead pets, and 1 forgotten anniversary. He was clean, untouched by her history, but she was about to touch mine. I'd been planning this moment for exactly 6 days and 13 hours. I had the timing down to the second. The message was pre-written. All I had to do was hit send. And I did. At precisely 8:46 p.m., just as she leaned in to clink glasses with him, her phone buzzed. I could tell the vibration startled her. She fished it out lazily, I still giggling, thumb swiping with the grace of someone who expected a meme or a "where you at" from one of her girlfriends. Then she read it. It took exactly 3 seconds. First, her mouth froze mid-smile. Then her eyes darted across the screen again. Her fingers tightened around the phone. The color in her cheeks drained faster than the wine glass she had just emptied. She set it down like it might explode. She whispered something to the guy. He leaned in, curious. Then she showed him the screen. His eyebrows shot up. That's when she stood. Not gracefully. Not the way she'd practiced in mirrors. It was sudden, desperate. The chair screeched back. She almost tripped on her bag. People turned. He tried to follow, hand out like he could fix it, but she shook her head hard, like she was swatting a fly made of guilt. She didn't even grab her coat. She bolted. Out of the bar. Into the night. And I stood in the dark, unseen. Watching. Listening. Waiting for the moment she'd understand what I had done. She thought I was weak. She thought I would never find out. She thought laughter meant victory. But that message? It shattered everything. And this is just the start. I didn't expect her to run. I expected confusion, maybe tears, maybe that wild denial she always resorted to when the truth knocked too hard on her door. But I never imagined she'd charge out of the bar like it was on fire, heels clapping against the wet sidewalk, face pale as chalk under the street lamps. Her purse slipped from her shoulder and hit the pavement with a soft thud, spilling half her life across the curb, keys, lipstick, that little notebook she always scribbled in. She didn't even stop to pick it up, just kept moving, like if she ran fast enough, she could outrun what I sent her. I didn't follow. Not yet. I waited, staring at the broken pieces of her composure lying in the gutter. Her guy, stumbled out after her about 30 seconds later, clearly unsure whether to go after her or not. He didn't pick up the purse either, just looked around like the whole city had turned on him. Then he lit a cigarette and leaned against the side of the bar, checking his phone like he expected instructions. That told me everything. He wasn't her partner. He was a thrill, a pocket of chaos she could vanish into when my predictability got too boring. My fingers trembled, but not from guilt. From adrenaline. From the relief of having done something. Because up until that moment, I'd done nothing for months. I sat quietly while she came home later and later. I nodded when she said she was tired. I pretended not to notice the faint smell of cologne that wasn't mine clinging to her scarf. I even let her blame me for the silence between us. "You've just changed," she once said, while scrolling through her phone and sipping tea I made. She said it like I was the one unraveling. So yeah, I snapped. Not loudly, not violently, but methodically. I took every unanswered question, every cold shoulder, every suspicious giggle behind the bathroom door, and I weaponized it into a message that couldn't be unsent. I waited until she disappeared down the street and the lover disappeared inside. Then I crossed the street, picked up her purse, and tucked the scattered pieces back inside. That little notebook? I opened it. First page. Things I miss about myself before marriage. I swear my heart didn't even crack. It laughed. Because there it was, in her own handwriting, Scribbled between grocery lists and wine recommendations, the quiet confession that she never wanted the life we built together. I placed the notebook back. Gently. Respectfully, even. Then I left it right there on the bar table where she'd been laughing minutes earlier. A small memorial to whatever story she had been telling herself. I walked 2 blocks to my car, sat inside, locked the doors, and pulled out my phone. That message I sent her? It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even angry. It said, "I was 2 tables behind you. He doesn't know the things I do, but he will soon." That's it. No punctuation. No emotion. Because the real pain isn't in yelling. It's in clarity. In the knowledge that someone knows what you did and is giving you the chance to explain yourself before the silence takes over everything. My phone buzzed 6 times on the drive home. I didn't answer. Then it rang. I let it ring out. At 10:17 p.m., she sent a photo of her standing in front of our house. Alone. Her hair drenched from rain that hadn't even started when she left. She was holding the spare key like it was a grenade. At 10:18 p.m., I blocked her. And at 10:19 p.m., I turned off the phone, parked one neighborhood over, and sat in the dark with my seat reclined. No music. No podcasts. Just silence. The kind she used to beg me for. I figured she'd eventually go inside. Maybe cry in the hallway. Maybe stare at the family photo on the shelf with that fake little smile of hers. Or maybe she'd just sit on the stairs, trying to guess how I found out. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that this wasn't about revenge. It was about leaving behind the version of me who begged to be noticed. And that version? He's already gone. I didn't go home that night. In fact, I didn't even drive back to the house the next morning. I stayed in the parking lot of a 24-hour laundromat off Route 7, slouched in the front seat, watching condensation build on the windshield. It was the kind of lonely that doesn't ache. It just buzzes quietly beneath your skin like static. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just sat there, rereading that notebook in my mind like it was some sacred text that had finally revealed the truth I had been too blind to see. I guess part of me expected her to disappear. I thought she might run off to that guy Jace, or Trent, or whatever name he fed her to make her feel 25 again. But at exactly 6:14 a.m., I checked the security camera feed on my phone. There she was, sitting on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket, like she was starring in some sad movie about heartbreak and misunderstanding. She must have stayed there all night. A year ago, that would have broken me. I would have rushed home with coffee and an apology I didn't owe. But now, it didn't move me. It just confirmed what I had suspected for weeks. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing the version of me who waited. So I made a few calls. First, I rescheduled a locksmith. Then I called my cousin Henry, the only person I trust in this world, and asked if his basement was still empty. It was. By 7 a.m., I had a new plan and a different kind of clarity. Not the bitter kind. The clean, sharp kind that feels like stepping out into cold air after months of being trapped indoors with stale heat and second-guessing. At 8:10 a.m., I pulled into the driveway. She jumped up like she'd been rehearsing that moment all night. Her blanket fell off her shoulders. Her eyes were puffy, and her mouth curled into this practiced look of concern, not guilt, not shame, just that patronizing face she used when she wanted to play therapist and victim in the same breath. "Where have you been?" she asked. It wasn't even a real question. It was a trap, a bait to make me say I had done something wrong. "I needed air," I said flatly, stepping past her. She followed close, barefoot on the porch, the morning chill clearly hitting her too late. "Doyle, can we talk? Please?" Talk. That was rich. We hadn't really talked in months. We had exchanged logistics. Groceries. Bills. Who's letting the dogs out? But talk? She didn't want to talk until she realized I wasn't playing the part anymore. Inside, the house was still dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't ask her to sit. I went straight to the coat closet, pulled out the box I had packed 2 nights ago, and handed it to her. "What's this?" she said, looking confused. "Everything that belongs to the you I don't recognize anymore." She opened the box. Inside were the little things she had started to leave around like breadcrumbs, the second phone she thought I hadn't found, her lipstick-stained coffee thermos she claimed she lost at work, in front and center, a printed copy of every message I had pulled from her phone. All of them. Every emoji. Every haha. Every midnight. "I wish you were here." Her hands trembled as she leafed through the pages. Her lips moved silently like she was doing the math on how long I had known. Doyle, I didn't mean to." "You did," I interrupted. "You meant to laugh with him. You meant to lie to me. You meant to sit in that bar last night, toss your hair, and pretend I was some forgettable detour. That wasn't an accident. That was a choice. Tears welled up, but I didn't flinch. Not anymore. She tried again, softer this time. Please, you have to understand. I felt alone. You were distant. You stopped seeing me. I had heard this line in every sad story ever told. You stopped seeing me. As if the solution to emotional distance was to climb into someone else's bed and write love letters under a fake name. I stopped seeing you, I echoed. Because you stopped being you. She dropped the box on the floor, the papers spilling everywhere. And then, for a brief second, the mask slipped. That polished, wounded woman routine broke, and I saw the real her, frustrated, exposed, angry at the fact that I hadn't begged. You think you're so righteous, don't you? She snapped. That little message? That dramatic show at the bar? What was that? Revenge? Punishment? No, I said. That was me finally saying something. She stood in silence for a long time. And then, for the first time in a very long time, she had nothing clever to say. I handed her the envelope with the separation agreement I had printed at 3 a.m. the previous night, long before I ever hit send on that message. This isn't about revenge, I said quietly. This is about not being the background anymore. And then I walked back out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. She could keep the house. But the story? That's mine now. I didn't drive straight to Henry's place. I took the long route, coasting down side roads that curved like veins through quiet woods, the kind of roads where the cell signal drops and the world forgets about you for a while. I needed that. I needed time to let the weight of it all settle, to breathe without hearing her voice ricocheting off the walls of my mind. I think I needed to feel like I'd left something behind, and for the first time in years, I had. The box I gave her wasn't just about evidence. It was about stripping away the fiction she'd built around herself. For months, maybe longer, she had been walking through our home like a guest, editing the version of our life that suited her audience. What she never realized was that I had been watching the raw footage the whole time. As I pulled into Henry's driveway, a crooked gravel stretch behind his cabin, I felt something shift in me. Not peace exactly, but clarity. His dog barked once from the back porch, then went quiet when it recognized my scent. That dog always liked me more than Henry. Probably because I didn't fake anything with it. Henry came out in sweatpants and a hoodie, holding a coffee mug and squinting against the morning light. You look like hell, he said flatly, like he'd been rehearsing that line since I texted him. I probably did. I hadn't shaved in days, hadn't changed my clothes since Thursday, and there were lines under my eyes that felt deep enough to drown in. Got a mattress in the basement? I asked. Already aired out and made, he nodded, stepping aside. I didn't ask him for more. That's the thing about cousins who know your childhood secrets. They can smell the kind of pain you don't say out loud. We weren't close like brothers, but he was the one person who wouldn't offer cheap advice or ask why I didn't just forgive her. He knew the kind of damage that doesn't bleed but leaves a bruise under your bones. For the next hour, I sat in silence on a fold-out chair in his garage, sipping bad coffee and listening to the hum of his fridge. He didn't press me, just slid a sandwich across the table and turned on the radio to fill the quiet. When the news came on, I finally spoke. She thought I'd chase her. Henry chewed slowly. Did you? I didn't answer right away. I stared at the grain of the wooden table, tracing the scars and knife marks. I chased her for years, Henry. In my head. In my choices. Every time I gave up something I loved because she didn't like it. Every time I apologized for being tired, for being quiet, for being me, I was chasing her. And she still wanted more. Still looked for something I could never be. He nodded. Not an agreement. Just acknowledgement. Then I pulled out my phone and turned it back on. 37 messages. 10 missed calls. A voicemail labeled reoccurring. I didn't listen to it. Instead, I opened the last message she had sent, timestamped just after I left the house. If you walk out that door, don't expect to find the same version of me waiting. It didn't sting. Not even a little. Because that's what she never understood. I wasn't afraid of her becoming someone new. I was afraid she already had, and I'd been too blind to notice. I typed out a single reply. That version of you already left. I just finally caught up. And I sent it. That night, I stayed in Henry's basement. The mattress was stiff, and the heater clicked every hour, but I slept harder than I had in months. No dreams. No guilt. Just a vacuum where her voice used to live in my head. When I woke up, I had a new message. This one wasn't from her. It was from the guy in the bar. It read, "We need to talk. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't even know how he got my number. But the second I read those words, something inside me shifted again. Because suddenly, I realized. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't reply to his message right away. In fact, I spent the better part of the morning just pacing Henry's backyard, trying to make sense of why he would want to talk. The man she laughed with. The man I saw reach for her hand like he'd earned it. What did he think we had to discuss? Was this some kind of twisted apology to her? Or worse, did he think I'd been the villain in all this, and now he was stepping up to clear the air like a noble stand-in? It wasn't until I noticed my palms were sweating that I realized I was nervous. Not angry. Not even hurt. Just rattled. Because even after everything, I hadn't expected him to come into it. I had always pictured her betrayal as something private, between me and her, between a husband and wife, in the slow decay of everything unspoken. But now it was real in a different way. Now it had a face, a voice, a phone number. I finally messaged back. You've got 10 minutes. Public place. No cameras. Don't make me regret this. He responded in under a minute with a location, a coffee shop halfway between the bar and the city library. It was a quiet place. Neutral. I appreciated the strategy, even if it pissed me off that he had one. I got there early and chose a table by the window, my back to the corner wall so I could see everyone who walked in. A ridiculous instinct, probably, but I didn't know what kind of man I was about to face. Was he younger than I thought? Was he married too? Was this going to spiral into one of those tragic scenes that ends with cops and bystanders filming on their phones? He walked in exactly on time. Tall. Better dressed than me, of course. Pressed slacks, a coat that looked like it cost more than my car battery. But he didn't have that smugness anymore. Not like he did at the bar. His posture was tight, anxious, like he didn't know how this conversation was supposed to go either. He saw me, paused, then made his way over, eyes locked on mine. Doyle, he asked, keeping his voice low. You're lucky I even showed up, I replied, not standing. He nodded, pulled out the chair, and sat down across from me like a man stepping onto thin ice. Then he did something I didn't expect. He didn't open with excuses. He didn't blame alcohol or her confusing signals. He just said, I didn't know. I stared at him. Didn't know what? That she had a husband? He shook his head. No. I knew about you. I mean, I knew she was married, but I didn't know she was lying. I thought you were separated. That it was over. That she was just cleaning up the pieces. I laughed. Bitter. Short. Cleaning up the pieces by playing house and laughing in my face behind my back? She told me you'd been living apart, he continued quickly. That the divorce was in progress. That she was waiting on paperwork. I swear, man, I wouldn't have touched her if I'd known you two were still. He trailed off, like he couldn't finish the sentence. I leaned in a little. Still what? Still deluded enough to think she loved me. He looked down, swallowed hard. She said you were controlling. That you'd stopped listening. That you were distant. And honestly, she seemed sad, man. I believed her. She played the part. There it was again. The part. Like she was auditioning for some role in her own drama. Reinventing herself to whoever stood in front of her long enough to listen. I should have felt anger. But instead, I just felt hollow. Like every version of her I had ever known was nothing but a costume. She always had a gift for rewriting stories, I muttered. It's amazing how people only become monsters when they stop giving her attention. He looked up at me. I ended it. After that night. When she ran out, when she showed me your message, I knew. She didn't cry for you. She panicked. She wasn't sorry. She was just exposed. I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. We both sat in that silence for what felt like forever. Two men who were never meant to meet, connected only by the same hurricane. He pulled something from his pocket, a ring. Not mine. A cheap one. A promise ring, probably. She gave me this 3 days ago. Said it didn't mean anything serious, just a symbol. He placed it on the table like it burned. You should know, she told me she loved me. After only 2 months. Like it was nothing. That was the part that finally hit me. Not the betrayal. Not the lies. But the ease with which she said it. Like love was a bus token. Like it could be passed around until it meant nothing. I stood up. She doesn't know what love is, I said quietly. She just likes hearing the echo of her own voice when someone repeats it back. He didn't stop me when I left. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just nodded, a quiet understanding passing between two strangers caught in the same storm. When I got back to my car, I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face looked older. my eyes harder. And yet, for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was her. The message read, "Come home. Let's talk. Please. No more games." But she didn't understand. The game had already ended, and she'd never seen who was holding the scoreboard. I didn't respond to her message. I sat in the driver's seat for over an hour, watching that little text bubble, half expecting it to explode into a wall of follow-ups, apologies, guilt trips, voice memos dripping in tears. But it stayed quiet. Just that one message. "Come home. Let's talk. Please. No more games." What she didn't get, or maybe what she never cared to get, was that I was never playing a game. I was surviving. The only one playing was her, and she played every role: the victim, the heroine, the misunderstood lover, the woman trapped in a house built by the man who loved her most. She never realized the price I paid to keep that house from collapsing, sacrificing bits of myself year after year just to keep her smiling. And in the end, she still walked out the emotional door long before I ever touched the handle. That afternoon, I drove back to the house. Not to reconcile, not to talk, but because there was still one room I hadn't cleared out: the study. My space. The place where I once wrote poetry I never shared, where I kept old letters from my dad, where I planned anniversaries she no longer remembered. It was the only part of the house that still smelled like me. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was gone. I was grateful. I didn't want another scene. I didn't want to look into her eyes and hear another version of the truth she tailored for comfort. I just wanted to gather what was left of myself and leave before the air got too heavy again. Inside, the living room was spotless. Too clean, actually. The kind of clean that screams effort, not order. I noticed she had lit one of the fancy candles she used only when guests were over. There was a faint trace of music, too. Not loud, just enough to pretend everything was normal. It wasn't. I went straight upstairs, unlocked the study, and paused in the doorway. Nothing had changed. My books were still in alphabetical order. The armchair still had the indent where I used to fall asleep with a bourbon in hand. And taped to the desk was a note, her handwriting, delicate but rushed. "If you ever come back to this room, please read what's in the drawer. I'm sorry. I really am." I stood there for a long time, arms crossed, stomach tight. Then I opened the drawer. Inside were three things. First, a photograph. Us. From our second anniversary. She had her arms around me, cheeks pressed together. We looked stupid happy. I remembered the moment clearly because the waiter had dropped wine on her dress 10 minutes later, and she laughed so hard she cried. That night, I thought I had everything. Second, a crumpled note, almost torn in the corner. "I don't know who I am anymore. I thought I wanted escape, but I think I just wanted to be seen. You stopped looking. I stopped asking. I made choices I can't take back." It was her handwriting, but it didn't feel like her voice. It read like someone reaching for a lifeline too late. And third, a hotel key card. No envelope. No address. Just the key. That was when my chest tightened. It wasn't a memory. It was an invitation. A final act. She was giving me the option to meet her, face to face, one last time, in a place where history couldn't follow us into the room. I should have walked away. I should have tossed the key in the trash and kept packing. But something in me, something pathetic, maybe, wanted to see what she would do with a version of me that no longer begged. So I wrote one sentence on the back of her note, placed it carefully on the desk, and walked out of the study, closing the door behind me like I was sealing off an old wing of my heart. The sentence said, "I'll come to the room, but only to end the story." Later that night, I stood outside a boutique hotel downtown, holding the keycard between my fingers like it was a decision. The lights inside glowed gold through tall windows, and couples passed me by without noticing the storm walking between their laughter. She had chosen room 413. I stepped into the elevator, watching the numbers climb, wondering if she'd be sitting on the bed rehearsing her lines. Or crying. Or both. When the elevator dinged and the door slid open, I walked the hall slowly, like approaching a grave I didn't know how to mourn. I slid the card into the lock. It turned green. The door opened. And there she was, standing by the window, waiting for me. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what she said next. She didn't turn around at first. She just stood there with her arms crossed over her stomach, staring out the window like the view could somehow narrate what she was about to say. The room was too quiet. No TV humming in the background. No music playing softly to ease the tension. Just her breath. And mine. One shallow, one uneven. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, controlled, like she'd been practicing in front of a mirror. I don't want to justify what I did, she said, still facing the glass. But I think you deserve to know why. I didn't answer. I didn't trust my voice. I leaned against the wall near the door, arms folded, jaw clenched, waiting for her to shatter whatever illusion she had left. She finally turned, slowly, like she was afraid looking at me might crack something inside her. She looked tired. Not in a sleepless way, in a soul-heavy way. Her makeup was barely there, just traces of mascara like she didn't want to look too put together. Like she wanted me to see her stripped down, emotionally raw, without the sparkle. She stepped forward but kept her distance. I didn't fall in love with him, she said. I didn't even like him that much. He was convenient, available. I could say anything to him and feel heard, even if none of it mattered. I blinked slowly. You had me, I finally said. For years. You had someone who listened. Maybe I wasn't the best at showing it, but I was there, Rhea. I was always there. She nodded like she'd heard it all before. Maybe she had. Maybe she had rehearsed her lines so many times that real emotion didn't even register anymore. It wasn't about love, she whispered. It was about being wanted again. Do you know what it's like to walk into a room and feel invisible? Even in your own home? I nearly laughed. You mean like how I felt? For the last year? Watching you come home from girls' nights with perfume that wasn't yours and stories that changed depending on your mood. She lowered her eyes. I know I hurt you. I thought maybe I could fix it before it spiraled. But then I saw your message in that bar, and I knew it was over. I stared at her, searching for something guilt, clarity, a crack in the performance. What I found instead was something worse, resignation. She wasn't here to fight for me. She was here to surrender. But then she said something that froze me. That guy, she said slowly. The one from the bar, he wasn't the first. It hit like a slap across the face. I blinked. Once. Twice. My vision narrowed, like the air in the room had been sucked out through a pinhole. She continued, voice trembling now. There were two others. Not at the same time. Not relationships. Just moments. Weak, stupid moments. They didn't mean anything, Doyle. But they happened. And I kept telling myself that if I could just keep pretending, maybe I'd grow back into the version of myself that deserved you. I stepped back from the wall, my heartbeat rising in my throat. So all this time, I said, voice shaking, while I was losing sleep over one guy, you were hiding three? She looked at me then, really looked at me. And her eyes, for the first time, showed what she was trying to suppress. Fear. Not fear of me hurting her. Fear of the consequences of truth. I didn't come here to be forgiven, she said. I came here to tell you everything because I knew. If I didn't, you'd never really walk away. And I'd never really let you go. I turned to the window. The city glowed beyond the glass, distant and different, alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. I imagined what my life could look like without her in it. It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't full of joy. But it was real. Honest. Mine. Do you remember that trip to Portland? I asked suddenly. When we got lost in the fog and you told me that as long as we were together, we'd always find our way? She nodded slowly, silent. You lied then too, I said, eyes still on the window. I walked to the nightstand, picked up the hotel's branded notepad, and scribbled something quickly. I folded it in half, placed it on the bed, and turned to leave. Wait, she said, her voice cracking. What's that? It's the last thing I'll ever say to you in person. And with that, I walked out of the room, past the bellhop who barely glanced up, past the lobby where couples checked in smiling, past the hotel that would probably host another broken truth tomorrow. In the elevator, I breathed deep for the first time. Outside, I got in my car and drove toward nothing. But the note I left on the bed? It said, I loved you even when you weren't lovable. I mourned you before you died in my heart. Now, you're free. So am I. It's strange, the silence that follows closure. It's not loud or dramatic. There's no thunderclap, no cinematic swell. It's just still, like the world exhales with you. That's what I felt driving home from the hotel, not anger, not grief, just the absence of weight. Like I'd been carrying a heavy suitcase for years without realizing it, and someone finally whispered, you can set it down now. I didn't go back to Henry's. I didn't go back to the house either. Instead, I drove north. No plan, no destination, just the road and a playlist I hadn't touched since she stopped asking me to play music on our drives. I passed a line of trees bursting with color and remembered I hadn't really noticed the seasons in a long time. Everything had been so dim in my head for so long, like I'd been watching my life through frosted glass. Somewhere near the lake, I stopped at a small diner with a crooked neon sign and sat at the counter. The waitress had kind eyes and didn't ask why I looked like I hadn't slept in a week. She just brought me a mug of coffee and said, "Refills are on me, Han." I sat there for hours, reading a paperback someone had left behind, underlining lines I wanted to remember. By sunset, I checked my phone, not to see if Ria had written again. I'd already blocked her. I checked for something else, something new, and I realized I didn't need to find anything just yet. For the first time in years, there was no one waiting for me to be something I wasn't. No one silently measuring my worth against some unspoken checklist. No one pretending. In the weeks that followed, I started small. I moved into a short-term rental not far from the lake, a little cottage with uneven floors and a chimney that smokes too much. But it's mine. I brought only the essentials, my books, my coffee maker, my old guitar. I called my mother more. I stopped explaining myself to people who only called when they needed something. And I started seeing a therapist, something I never thought I'd do. Not to fix anything, just to understand why I let myself be so small for so long. I even found a job at a nearby bookstore. The pay's less, but I get to spend my day surrounded by stories. And for now, that's enough. One morning, I woke up to the sound of birds outside my window and realized something. I hadn't thought about her in 2 whole days. Not her lies. Not her laugh. Not the version of me she tried to erase. Just me. Just now. And that's when I knew I was going to be okay. Not because I got closure from her, but because I gave it to myself. Sometimes, freedom doesn't come from walking out. It comes from realizing you don't need to walk back in. Thanks for listening, Reddit. I think I'm done writing about her now. But I'm just getting started writing about me.